Hey guys, tonight we begin with something that shouldn't be possible. Ice in the desert. You're standing just outside the walls of an ancient Egyptian village. The sky is a velvet dome above, thick with stars, and the air has finally cooled after a scorching day. Your sandals leave soft imprints in the sand, still radiating a ghost of heat. The palm trees around you sway gently, their leaves whispering to one another, as if they too are telling secrets about what's about to happen. A thin breeze brushes against your cheeks, cool, dry, and oddly crisp. It smells like baked clay, distant water, and the faint sweetness of crushed date husks. Somewhere nearby, a donkey shifts its weight, and the creak of wooden wheels reminds you that life here doesn't stop just because it's dark. In fact, this is the hour when something rather miraculous begins. You step into a small courtyard. The ground is swept smooth, and a dozen wide-mouthed clay jars are arranged with quiet purpose. Their surfaces glisten slightly damp from water. Inside them, slowly soaking through the porous pottery. No one speaks. Everyone knows to be still. The desert has its rules, and tonight the rules bend just slightly in your favor. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your fingers trace the edge of a water jar. It's surprisingly cool. A servant hums softly in the corner, laying down linen sheets near the jars to help protect the precious chill from dust. This isn't just superstition. This is ancient science, ritual, and survival, all bundled into one quiet operation under the stars. You sit on a low stone bench. There's no fanfare, no mechanical hum, just silence and starlight. And yet, this is a refrigeration experiment in motion. Thousands of years before electricity. The villagers don't call it that, of course. They just know that on certain nights when the air is dry and the sky clear, something marvelous happens. Water can turn to ice. Not everywhere in Egypt is warm all the time. Desert nights, especially in Upper Egypt, can get startlingly cold, just low enough, if the humidity cooperates, to coax freezing. You can feel it now, can't you? That creeping bite in the air. It settles around your ankles, first crawling up as the sand loses its stored heat. The village becomes a kind of natural laboratory, cooled not by machines, but by time air and human patience. You peer up at the sky. There's no moon tonight. That's good. Less radiant heat. The darker the sky, the colder the earth becomes. You rub your arms and pull your shawl tighter, because this isn't just storytelling anymore. It's temperature and timing. A performance where every cast member must hit their cue, or the entire show is lost. And here's the curious bit. Historians once dismissed these tales of desert ice as poetic exaggeration. After all, how could ice possibly exist in one of the hottest places on Earth without some magical intervention? But then came studies, little clues left behind in ancient documents, climate records, and accounts from later travelers who had seen it with their own eyes. One Persian emissary described a cool cream served with shards of glass water, and it wasn't until recently that scholars realized he may have meant literal ice. Even so, debate lingers. Some scholars argue these were flukes, freak weather events rather than widespread practice. Others believe that the ancient Egyptians, masters of engineering and rhythm, understood their climate intimately enough to predict and harvest cold when conditions aligned. You glance again at the jars. The rims are beginning to collect tiny beads of dew. It's working. Behind you, a child scampers by, giggling, chased by an older sibling with a twig broom. It's not all solemn silence. Life still hums along even in the midst of wonder. A cat slinks through the shadows, silent as a myth, brushing past your ankle. You feel its warmth for just a moment. And then the chill returns. A servant pours more water into one of the jars, watching the level rise just enough to be caught by the desert's invisible hands. The texture of the jar feels like sandstone. You run your fingers along it again. Cool. Cooler than before. It's not frozen. Yet. But the air feels like it's holding its breath. You inhale deeply. The scent is strange now, like wet stone and cold copper. You weren't expecting that. Ice, even forming, seems to have a smell. Time moves slowly in this village. There's no rush, no ticking clock. Only the wind, the sand, and the silent race between sun and moon. A nearby torch flickers, its flame tugged sideways by a sudden breeze. It's a reminder the night is still young and colder. Stillness is coming. You lean back and close your eyes, just for a second. And in that second, you're no longer in your century. You're in theirs, watching, waiting, feeling the miracle of ice born from dust, from dryness, from design. The air is even colder now, You stand up slowly, your joints reluctant after sitting on stone for so long. All around you, the village sleeps, or pretends to. Through shuttered windows and thin reed mats, you catch glimpses of flickering oil lamps. Hear soft coughs, the shuffle of feet over rush mats. But out here in the open courtyard, it's the jars that command the night. The clay pots seem to breathe. Moisture seeps through their sides and evaporates into the dry night air, stealing warmth with every invisible breath. This is the quiet genius of evaporative cooling. No wires, no humming engines, just ancient physics in a linen-wrapped world. You crouch beside one of the jars again. The rim is faintly frosted, damp, but firm. You press your fingers to the surface and flinch, not from pain, but from surprise. It's genuinely cold. Not just desert night cool, but almost biting, like a shadow of winter dared to cross the sands. The science of it is simple. If you squint just right, porous clay allows water to seep out slowly. As it evaporates, it draws heat from the water inside. The drier the air, the more eagerly it drinks that moisture, and the more heat it carries away. The process is slow, almost lazy, but on the right nights, still clear and bone dry, the jars become tiny miracles. You glance at a nearby fig tree. Its leaves barely move. Good. Wind would disrupt the process. This night, at least, is perfect. Servants tiptoe in and out of the courtyard, adjusting jars, checking lids occasionally, whispering to one another. No one wants to disturb the air too much. Even footsteps feel like intrusions here. You feel it too. That reverent hush, like standing in a library where the books are frozen, drops of water. Overhead, constellations shift. Orion's belt tilts slightly, and you realize it's been an hour since you first arrived. The night is ticking forward, gently but insistently, like sand through an hourglass you can't flip back. And here comes a little-known truth. The Egyptians used this method not just for water, but for wine, milk, even delicate pastes used in medicine. Cooling wasn't just comfort. It was preservation ritual and class distinction. If you could afford to cool your drink in a land where the sun ruled everything, you were someone important, someone touched by the gods, perhaps. A servant carrying a lamp passes close, and for a moment you see her face, weathered but calm. She places her jar with care, adjusting it so its narrow shadow falls in a certain direction. It's not superstition. Shadows cool faster. They knew that. They watched, they learned. A desert doesn't forgive guesswork. The jar she sets down, is wrapped with a band of linen soaked in water. You lean in and notice tiny salt crystals around the rim. Some believe the Egyptians added salt to quicken freezing, though not everyone agrees. Some say it's a modern myth projected backward. But when you're here watching it all unfold, even a myth feels like truth, if it matches the rhythm of the night. A few steps away, a young boy is kneeling, peering into one of the larger jars. He looks up, catches your eye, and grins. His breath curls in the air, visible like smoke. That's rare in Egypt. That means the temperature's close now, close to freezing. You walk over to him, kneel beside the jar, and peer in. A thin skin has formed over the surface of the water. Not solid, not yet, but glimmering like glass under the stars. You could swear the water is holding its breath, just like you are. And then there's the hum, faint, rhythmic, unspoken, not from the people, from the night itself. A kind of quiet resonance, the kind that comes when everything's aligned. The atmosphere, the moisture, the ancient patience of a people who refused to let heat have the final word. You sit back again and imagine what this must have felt like for them, not as a curiosity, but as accomplishment, as pride, creating cold in a world built from heat. That's alchemy, and perhaps that's why some early texts refer to this process as a gift from Thoth, the god of wisdom, not because it was magical, but because it was clever. And cleverness to the ancients was divine. Behind you, a dog barks once sharply, and then goes quiet. In the distance, you hear the low groan of a camel shifting in its pen. Life, even in stillness, doesn't stop here. But this moment, right now, is held in a bubble of chill moonlight and waiting. Another servant moves past. She carries a handful of reeds soaked in cool water, which she lays around one of the jars in a crisscross pattern. Insulation, slight protection from the radiating warmth of the ground. Every movement is deliberate. They know this process as if it were a dance passed down like a sacred story, whispered from mother to daughter. And here's your quirky detail. Some Egyptian poets described these moments in verse, writing about the night as a lover coaxing the water into dreaming itself solid. The image is soft, almost silly, and yet here you are, watching it happen. The jar nearest to you gives a soft pop. Just the clay adjusting to the shift in temperature. But it makes your heart skip anyway. Something ancient is happening here in real time. And you're lucky enough to witness it. You lie back just for a moment on a reed mat. Above you, the sky is all velvet and silver. Around you, jars are sweating. Shadows are stretching, and somewhere deep within the earth, the heat of the day is loosening its grip. You close your eyes, the coldness of the clay still on your fingertips. Sleep almost finds you here, wrapped in silence and moonlight. You wake with a soft shiver. The sky has deepened to indigo, and the stars are bolder now, closer somehow. You sit up slowly, your spine brushing against the brittle edge of the reed mat. Around you, the courtyard remains hushed, but something has changed. You can feel it in the air in your lungs. The cold is sharper now. It has taken hold. You crawl back toward the nearest jar and press your palm against it. It's cold. Cold enough to make you pull back. You peer inside, and there it is, a delicate crust, like a whisper stretching across the surface of the water. Not thick, not heavy, but there. Ice. Fragile, but real. You exhale slowly, your breath ghosting out into the night. It almost seems wrong to speak. This is sacred. This is science performing a magic trick. Evaporative cooling. That's what they call it now in classrooms and textbooks. But for these villagers, it was intuition shaped by time. Every droplet of water that escapes into the air takes a bit of warmth with it. The drier the night, the faster the water flees. And here under the desert's open sky, the water becomes an alchemist, sacrificing warmth to create chill. Your fingers hover over the ice. You resist the urge to touch it. Not yet. A nearby servant clucks softly to herself, checking the jars one by one, noting which ones have begun to freeze. She doesn't write it down. She doesn't need to. She knows these jars like you know your favorite mug. She nods to herself and moves on. And here's the beauty. This wasn't some fringe experiment. Historians believe the practice may have been fairly widespread, especially in regions where night temperatures dipped dramatically. The Nile's rhythm wasn't just about water. It was about air, about breath, about knowing when the world tilted just right. Some records describe large open courtyards or flat rooftops lined with jars. Others mention servants rising before dawn to harvest the ice, wrapping it in palm leaves, storing it in shaded clay vaults. It was a race against the sun, a nightly gamble with the elements. You can imagine them. Silent figures moving in the dark, whispering to each other, listening for the telltale crack of forming ice. No torches, no fire. Light would ruin everything. The cold needs darkness. A breeze tiptoes across the courtyard, sending a ripple through your linen robe. The sand around you has lost its warmth entirely. It feels clean, still, like the earth has taken a deep breath in and forgotten to let it out. You glance back into the jar. The ice is thicker now. You hear a quiet tick, a single sound like a grain of rice snapping. The water is giving way. And yet, even here, there's disagreement. Some modern historians argue this method wouldn't have worked reliably in most Egyptian climates. The temperatures don't dip low enough, they say. The humidity isn't quite right, but others point to evidence from desert regions today, where under the right conditions, water still freezes overnight in clay pots, just as it did back then. The debate continues. But here under the stars, with frost biting at your toes, it feels less like a question and more like a truth. You get up and walk slowly toward another jar. This one is larger, deeper. A stone rests across its opening to keep dust out. You remove it carefully and peer inside. The surface is still liquid, but barely. You blow gently across it and watch the water tremble. A dog trots past its breath, visible in the air. It pauses, looks at you, then disappears into the alleyway, like a ghost slipping between timelines. A servant approaches, carrying a small bundle of linen. She offers it to you, a gesture, not a command. Inside are a few shards of ice, already melting. You take one, hold it up to the stars. It sparkles, catches a sliver of moonlight, then drips cold water onto your wrist. It's easy to forget what this meant back then. In a world without refrigeration, where decay and rot were daily enemies, this was gold. To chill a drink, to cool a wound, to offer the gods something rare and fleeting. Ice was more than useful. It was powerful. And sometimes it was political. There are tales, perhaps embellished, perhaps not, of regional rulers demanding ice for their feasts of entire villages, punished if the harvest was poor. That's the danger of being too clever. Eventually, someone expects the miracle on demand. You let the shard fall back into the cloth, now damp, with its own undoing. The servant smiles and slips away. A child nearby sneezes in his sleep. His mother wraps him tighter in a wool blanket, tucking his arms beneath his chest. Even warmth in Egypt could become a kind of wealth, earned, borrowed, or stolen from the cold. Your mind drifts now. You imagine a priest awakening in the temple, his mouth dry, craving cool water. He signals a servant. Moments later, a cup appears, beads of sweat curling down its sides, the water within blessed by the night. That cup is not just drink. It's proof. proof that man, even here, can bend the world if he watches closely enough. Another breeze stirs the hem of your robe. This one feels different, more urgent, carrying the scent of the Nile and something else. Anticipation. You realize the sky has shifted again. Fewer stars now. A faint gray beginning to crawl along the eastern horizon. The sun is on its way, and with it, the end of the cold. You look again at the jars, some still liquid, others with rims of delicate frost, each one racing against the light. And in that moment, you understand this isn't just a clever trick. It's a prayer, a quiet plea to the night, asking it to linger just a little longer. You're not sure when the silence broke, only that now everything feels more alive. Somewhere beyond the walls, a rooster begins its early insistent cry, still distant, still cautious, as if even it knows the cold hasn't lifted just yet. The sky above is softening from a deep blue to violet, and with that subtle change comes the shift in the air, colder at first, but now tentative, like a held breath about to be exhaled. You remain low to the ground, tracing patterns in the sand with a fingertip. The granules are dry, powdery, but cool. Not cold, like the jars, not dramatic. Just hushed, like even the desert is waiting. You glance over and notice a line of shallow stone basins you hadn't seen before, arranged carefully along the north-facing wall. They're just depressions in the earth, rimmed with pale limestone, each cradling a small pool of water, barely a finger deep. The surface is motionless, glossy, but if you lean in close enough to catch your own reflection, you see it, the thin glint of frost. Here it is again. The impossible made normal. These basins, you realize, are another part of the method. Perhaps even older than the jars. No walls, no clay, just stone and air. The shallowness means the water loses heat quickly, and with the right chill in the air, it begins to crystallize. A technique both brilliant and beautifully simple. You reach out and press your finger gently to the surface. A soft crack echoes through the morning. Ice. Real ice. Not thick enough to lift, but just enough to snap under your touch. It tingles on your skin like a sigh from a different season. A few steps away, an older man leans on a wooden staff, watching you with amusement. First time, he seems to ask with his eyes. You smile, and he nods once, before slowly making his way toward a nearby basin, kneeling with the ease of someone who's done this 1,000 times. And this is what surprises you most. Not the science, not even the success, but the calm the lack of ceremony. No one here is shouting in joy or rushing about. They simply observe, gather, and go on, as if creating ice in the desert were just another part of the rhythm, which, in a way, it is. You follow the man's movements. He scrapes the thinnest layer of ice into a woven reed basket lined with wool. It crunches as it falls like tiny pieces of glass. You hear the sound and feel a sudden longing for nothing in particular, just the odd sensation of watching time made visible. The Egyptians may not have had a word for refrigeration, but they had a deep respect for control, of water, of air, of time itself. They knew how to wait, how to read shadows, how to listen to the cold. And here in the hush before sunrise, they harvested not just ice, but the fruit of patience. There's a whisper among historians that this method might have been used for more than just cooling drinks. Some believe it played a role in early medicine. Ice applied to fevers or swelling, even used to slow decay in temple offerings. No physical documents confirm this, of course, but stories remain. Murals, oral tradition, and the lingering shape of these shallow basins themselves passed from one generation to the next. Others are more skeptical. They point to the lack of widespread ice references in ancient texts, suggest the temperatures were too mild, the methods too inconsistent. A rare novelty, they say. A trick of a particularly dry year. But then again, you think skeptics rarely sit on cold sand in the dark and wait. The basin before you now has begun to melt at the edges. The ice still clings in the middle, but the sun is whispering at the horizon, and the chill is beginning to retreat. A gentle breeze carries the smell of breakfast fires, wood smoke, baking grain, something faintly sweet. You hear laughter from a nearby courtyard. A clay door creaks open. The village is waking. But here, in this little corner, the ice remains. For a moment longer, at least. You sit with it in silence, watching each droplet fall, each crack widen. This isn't just water. It's time frozen and then released, a tiny echo of a colder world that lives only in stolen hours. Another man joins you, this one younger. He lays out a cloth and begins gently lifting the remaining ice into a pouch. He nods to you as he works, and you recognize the motion. Delicate, careful, grateful. Not because the ice is rare, but because it is brief. And that's perhaps the most important thing, the brevity. This ice will not last, not through the day, not through the heat that's already gathering its strength just beyond the hills. But for now, for this 1 hour, The desert has softened, opened its fist, and given something cool enough to make you believe in small wonders. You close your eyes, not to sleep, but to remember this feeling, the weight of the cold in your palm, the crackle of frost beneath your fingertips, the joy of watching water. Forget just for a moment what it's supposed to be. The man finishes gathering the last of the ice. He stands, smiles once more, and disappears into the waking village. You stay behind just a little longer, just long enough for the final shards to melt. You follow the winding path out of the courtyard, now past low mud brick walls, and sleeping goats beginning to stir in their pens. The jars and basins are behind you, but the chill they held still clings faintly to your skin, like the last trace of a dream. You wrap your robe tighter, stepping into the shadowed space between houses. The path is narrow, lined with crushed limestone that crunches softly beneath your feet. The cold doesn't disappear all at once. Instead, it fades in layers. You can feel it slipping away. First from your face, then your arms, then your feet. The sky is streaked now with soft rose and gold, the sun preparing its entrance. You're heading toward the Nile, drawn by the promise of movement, of a new kind of rhythm. While the ice fades, the river flows eternal. As you near the banks, the air shifts again. It's not cold anymore, but it's not quite warm either. It carries the smell of mud and silt and reeds, damp and alive. A fisherman in a faded tunic casts his net with a practiced flick of the wrist. The sound of the weights hitting water is gentle, rhythmic, like breathing, and it's here, by the water, that you start to understand how the Nile may have whispered the secret of cold into the ears of ancient engineers. During winter, when the nights are longest, the river can exhale fog so thick it hugs the land like a blanket. And some mornings, that fog glistens with frost at its edges, clinging to papyrus, outlining date palms, coating boat ropes with tiny pearls of ice. It's not common, but when it happens, it turns the world into something fragile and glowing. You kneel at the river's edge, touching the slick surface of a stone. It's still cool. The water laps lazily at the banks, unconcerned with your presence. But you can't help imagining what it would be like to be an Egyptian priest, waking at dawn, seeing frost along the reeds, and understanding. This is the night, the one where water can be changed. Many scholars believe that this was how the idea took root, not as an invention, but as an observation. A strange morning, a frozen puddle, a shard of ice glittering on the hull of a boat. And then a question: what if we could do this on purpose. From there, it's easy to imagine the steps. Shallow basins, clay jars, carefully selected spots with just the right airflow and shadow. Observation becomes imitation. Imitation becomes tradition. And here's the quirky thing. Some hieroglyphs, rarely discussed, show what appears to be a vessel with cold mist rising from it. Some interpret it as incense. Others believe it's symbolic of the afterlife. But there's a small, curious camp of scholars who wonder, what if that vessel wasn't warm, but cold? It's a stretch, they admit. But history often lives in the gaps between translations. Behind you, a child's voice echoes from the village, calling for a mother, or maybe a goat. A soft clattering of clay cups. The day is beginning, but you're still tethered to the night. You sit down beside the river. The mud is damp, cool, firm beneath you. Across the water, the sun is peeking over the horizon. Its reflection flickers across the ripples like gold on silk. And here's something else to wonder about. Could the Nile's flow have helped stabilize temperature zones near its banks, creating natural cold pockets on winter nights? No one can say for sure. But the way the air moves here, the way fog lingers longer near water, it's easy to imagine someone noticing, someone experimenting, someone whispering their findings through generations until they became tradition. You dip your fingers into the river. The water isn't cold, not now, but there's still a memory of it, a memory of coolness. You hold your hand up, watch droplets fall from your fingers into the mud. There's a certain humility in all this. The idea that people so long ago, with no thermometers or sensors, could read the land with such precision. Not to conquer it, but to cooperate with it. They didn't demand cold. They waited for it, listened for it, prepared a place for it to arrive, and offered no complaint if it didn't. That patience, almost reverence, is what makes this story linger. You close your eyes. The sun is warm on your cheeks now, and you feel the last trace of chill leave your bones. You imagine what it must have been like to gather ice in the morning, to carry it carefully through the streets, to store it in cool vaults wrapped in palm fiber and linen, a gift that lasted only hours, a treasure meant to vanish. Behind you, the village clinks and murmurs into life. Pots are stirred. Goats bleat a market. Crier calls out something about fresh bread. But you remain still, held by the river, and the idea that something as fleeting as ice once defined a moment of human brilliance. You let your hand rest on the ground. It's warm now. The cold is gone. But the story remains. You leave the river slowly retreating retracing your steps through the awakening village. The air is warmer now, pleasant golden, filled with the soft clatter of morning routines. And yet, in one shaded corner of the street, something draws your eye, a pair of servants hauling what looks like a heavy wooden tray covered in linen. You follow at a respectful distance, curious. They pass through a low archway into a side courtyard, half hidden by olive trees and creeping vines. When you peek in, you see them carefully lowering the tray onto a raised platform. The cloth is peeled back, and beneath it, a stone basin, its bottom lined with a gleaming sheet of ice. Even now, under the rising sun, the ice is there. And next to it, you notice more than just jars and basins. There are baskets of herbs, strips of linen, small sealed pots. This is not just a storage space. This is a preservation chamber, a refrigerator centuries ahead of its time. You step in quietly. The floor is packed, earth cool underfoot. The basin of ice is shaded from above by woven mats and angled palm fronds. It's clever, using nature's own materials to buy just a little more time before the inevitable melt. One of the servants glances up, sees you watching, and gives a faint smile. She gestures toward a niche in the wall where several jars rest nestled in straw. One is uncorked. You move closer and peer inside a kind of thickened cream, its surface flecked with herbs. You sniff. It's tangy, fresh, untouched by spoilage, kept cold, kept alive. And there it is, the next piece of the puzzle. You realize these weren't just experiments in making ice. They were part of a larger system, a logic, a network of small shaded spaces where cold things could be kept for just long enough to matter. Cream for the sick, salves for the priests, perfumes that wilted in heat, offerings that needed to stay pure. And for the elite, wine chilled just enough to raise an eyebrow. You crouch beside the stone basin again, watching the ice slowly soften. A droplet falls, then another. A tiny stream begins to trace its way toward a drain carved in the stone. Even this space was engineered with purpose, no detail left to chance. Modern historians have debated whether this level of preservation was even possible. Some say the ice would melt too quickly, that the heat would win out within minutes. But others point to these little architectural details, angled walls, shade design airflow channels, as evidence that the ancients didn't just rely on luck. They planned. They adapted. And here's the quirky detail. In one partially deciphered papyrus, scholars found instructions for storing perishable items beneath the cool breath of the earth. Some believe it's metaphor. Others suspect it's literal. Advice for using subterranean or shaded vaults like this one to preserve items deemed sacred or rare. You glance up. The matting above the courtyard sways gently. Light filters through in soft ribbons, dappled and flickering. It keeps the sun at bay just barely. But soon, even this clever setup won't be enough. The cold will leave, as it always does. Still, you sit a moment longer, absorbing the hush of this place, the respect in it. These weren't careless containers, shoved in dark corners. These were sanctuaries, places where fleeting miracles, like ice, could rest a while longer before fading away. One of the servants lifts the basin, now careful and deliberate. A boy rushes over with a wool-lined basket, and together they transfer the remaining ice. Their movements are precise, nearly ritualistic. You wonder how many times they've done this, how many generations have passed these methods down. Not written in books, but carried in hands and muscle memory. You step back, letting them finish. And as you do, you catch a whisper of something on the air. A scent, lavender maybe, or crushed leaves. It comes from one of the sealed jars nearby. Cooling perfumes, used in temple rituals or offerings to the dead. You remember reading that some funerary rites required items to be presented as if untouched by heat, as pure as they were in life. Ice didn't just preserve food. It preserved meaning. And that's the deeper truth here. Ice wasn't just a novelty. It was a statement, a symbol, a fragile defiance of the world's natural order in a land defined by sun and heat and dust. To hold something cold was to hold control, even if only for a moment. The boy with the basket runs off now down a narrow alley, perhaps to the temple, perhaps to a wealthy house, perhaps to a quiet courtyard where someone waits for a chilled cup of fig syrup or a salve cooled to ease a fevered brow. You linger a little longer, watching the last drop fall from the basin's edge. Then you rise and step once more into the morning. The sun is higher now. The warmth is real. But you carry the cold with you. In memory, in awe, in the quiet wonder of what once seemed impossible. The morning stretches long and golden. Now the heat settling gently over the land like a warming blanket. You move through the village slowly, the hush of night behind you, the memory of ice still clinging faintly to your fingertips. The air has shifted. What was once crisp and quiet is now buzzing softly. Flies, waking up, markets unfolding palm fronds, rustling like paper stirred by breath. And then a sudden shift in atmosphere. You turn a corner and find yourself in a shaded portico. Stone columns casting long, angled shadows across the tiled floor. The sound of footsteps, soft and deliberate, echoes faintly in the space. Two men in clean linen robes pass by their sandals, quiet on stone. Between them, a servant follows, holding a silver tray. On it, a goblet. Beads of water glisten along its surface, trickling down like tiny tears. Inside, something dark. Wine, perhaps, gently swirling around a pale shard of ice. It catches the light. Here in this temple-adjacent courtyard, the miracle of ice is not just preserved. It is displayed, celebrated, and most importantly, served to the few. You're in a part of the village where not many are allowed. The homes are cleaner, the walls painted. Columns bear hieroglyphs in careful lines. Fountains trickle into shaded pools, more for beauty than function. And in these quiet pockets, ice becomes something else, a signal. This chilled drink wasn't just refreshment. It was power in a cup. Imagine being handed a goblet cooled with ice in a world where most people have never even seen ice. It's an unspoken message. I can make the desert yield. I can summon winter in July. I can control what you cannot. You follow quietly behind, careful not to intrude. Through a carved doorway, you glimpse a priest reclining beside a low table. Incense curling lazily around him. A boy kneels beside him, offering the goblet. The priest takes it without a glance, as if chilled wine were his right. Not a miracle harvested before dawn. This is the other side of the story. The part less poetic, more political. Ancient Egypt was a world of rituals and hierarchies, of access and denial, and the production of ice, however small, however rare, fit right into that. The elite had courtyards designed specifically for airflow, shaded storage chambers, servants who knew the patterns of the wind, and perhaps the influence to make sure the best nights for ice were reserved for their use. Some scholars suggest that temples themselves were part of this cold economy. Not just places of worship, but also of science, observation, experimentation. Priests, after all, were the ones who tracked stars, measured flood levels, and dictated calendars. It's not hard to imagine them tracking which nights produced the coldest air, which methods yielded the longest freeze. In some scrolls, there's mention of ritual waters that must be served at a bite of chill. A phrase so delicate, so easy to overlook. But what if it meant more than metaphor? What if it was literal? There's a small basin in the corner of the courtyard. half hidden by ferns. You peer in and notice the remains of a thin ice sheet, cracked, melting, but unmistakable. Even here, in this place of perfumed oils and oaths to the gods, the cold was summoned, not just for comfort, but for ceremony. And here's a wonderfully strange detail. In one funerary text, a ritual is described where a vessel of biting water must be poured over sacred tools before burial rites. Some believe it simply means clean water. Others believe the phrase is intentionally ambiguous. But there are those who suspect this bite was literal, that on the rarest of occasions, ice water was part of spiritual purification. You step away from the courtyard, now slipping back into the street, the sound of soft chanting fading behind you. The tiles underfoot are already warming. The sun is inching higher, painting gold across every surface. You pass a merchant cart, now loaded with figs and jars of syrup. The merchant fans himself, lazily glancing toward the temple wall. A boy approaches the stall, holding a sealed clay cup, which the merchant accepts reverently. It's the same kind used to deliver cold drinks. Payment, perhaps, or tribute. You begin to understand how ice moved, not just physically, but socially. From the basin to the hand, from servant to priest, from village to ritual. A quiet chain of hands, each treating it with the delicacy reserved for incense or gold leaf. You pause beneath a sycamore tree, grateful for the shade. Nearby, a group of women sit weaving their voices, soft laughing now and then. One of them fans a shallow bowl, nudging aside a linen cloth to reveal what's left of a single palm-sized disk of ice. She holds it up for the others, who gasp and giggle as it melts between her fingers. Even here, in this humble circle, the cold remains magical and fleeting. You watch as the last sliver dissolves in her hand. She wipes it on her dress and continues weaving her smile, still lingering. The others tease her. She shrugs, unfazed. Perhaps tomorrow they'll have more. You step back onto the sunlit road. Around you, the heat continues to build. But beneath it all, you carry the image of that priest, that goblet, that basin hidden in the ferns. In a land where heat is the constant cold, becomes sacred. The sun climbs higher now, and with it, the desert sharpens. The shadows grow short. The air begins to buzz with heat. Not the gentle warmth of morning, but the steady press of a furnace waking up. You lift your robe to fan your neck and continue through the streets already dappled with the shimmer of heat rising from stone and sand. And yet, while the village hums with the daily rush, merchants barking donkeys, braying baskets shuffled through narrow alleys, there's a separate world hidden beneath the surface, a quieter one. You see it now, in the way a boy darts through the crowd, clutching a wrapped bundle against his chest like a secret. Or the way a narrow door opens just long enough for him to slip inside before shutting again. You wait, then follow. The door leads you into a passage, a cool, dark corridor carved from thick mud brick. Inside, it feels like dusk again. You breathe in. The air is still, heavier, cooler. Torches flicker ahead. You creep forward until you reach a small chamber, glowing amber with firelight. Inside, 4 young servants work quickly, their fingers red from the cold. They're sorting through the contents of reed baskets lined with thick, insulating wool. Inside, shards of harvested ice, some already melting, others still intact, stacked like fragile jewels on woven mats. The youngest boy carefully places the pieces into shallow clay trays, which are then moved into clay niches along the wall, each one shaded and padded with straw like nests. There's no sign of extravagance here. No silver trays, no goblets. This is the backstage of the miracle, the engine room. These are the servants who chased the frost before dawn. You step further in, careful not to disturb their rhythm. Every movement is deliberate, fast but gentle. Ice handled like glass. And here's where the reality settles in. The night's harvest doesn't last long. It has to be moved quickly, preserved by any means possible. And while the rich sip chilled wine and priests anoint themselves with cold scented oils, it's the workers who keep the magic alive, quietly, in secret corners, without applause. One boy glances at you. He's no older than 10. He holds up a sliver of ice, pinched between 2 fingers. It's already beginning to melt. He grins, leans in, and presses it gently against your wrist. You flinch. It's so cold it burns. And then it's gone. They return to work without a word. You linger, observing the tools of their trade. Reed mats, straw bundles, clay vaults sunken half into the floor. Some of the ice is wrapped in linen, layered and tied like bandages, the fabric damp with condensation. You recognize one bundle being tucked into a box marked with temple symbols. A delivery, no doubt for ritual or royalty. You crouch near one of the sunken vaults, peering into the narrow mouth. It's a clever structure, stone-lined, shaded, insulated. You can feel the temperature drop just by leaning over it. These are their coolers. Handmade centuries before coolers had a name. Historians have long debated the logistics of this process. Could enough ice really be harvested? Was it reserved only for the most sacred uses? Some believe entire teams were devoted to it, trained not just in carrying or packing, but in reading the weather, in knowing the nights when the desert might yield its rarest gift. Others dismiss these ideas, calling them romantic. The climate wasn't cold enough, they argue. It was all symbolic. But if you stood here now, felt this cool air, saw the frost on these boys' hands, you'd wonder too. How much are we missing because we're not willing to believe in effort that leaves no grand monument behind? Because this is effort. The servants wear no gold. Their names will not be carved in stone, but every cup of chilled wine, every sacred offering placed in a cold bowl of copper, every whispered moment where someone pressed ice to their lips and marveled. Those all begin here. One of the boys reaches into a wool-wrapped pouch and lifts a perfect circle of ice. It's not much larger than a coin. He places it on a tile and watches as it begins to sweat, then vanish. He sighs, not in frustration, but in acceptance. The melt is part of the process. You don't fight it. You serve it. And here's the quirky truth in some stories passed down through servant lineages. Rare, almost folkloric. There's mention of chasing the cold. It wasn't just a task. It was a kind of game, a duty wrapped in reverence. Young boys were trained to wake before the stars faded, to search for the coldest corners, to test the wind with bare fingers. They didn't just carry ice. They learned to find it. You stand again, stepping back toward the doorway. The torches cast long shadows, now flickering across walls lined with ancient jars and sun-bleached tools. The cold is already lifting. You can feel it in the air. A soft shift, a quiet goodbye. The boys continue their work, silent, focused, their backs bent not with burden, but with purpose. And you realize something as you leave the miracle of ice in the desert isn't just about science or weather. It's about people who rose in darkness, who worked in silence, who knew the value of something destined to disappear by noon. The sun is bright again as you step outside. The street greets you with heat and noise and life, but you carry with you the memory of frost. The heat now is steady, full-bodied. It presses against your back as you walk, drawing beads of sweat along your collarbone and temple. The memory of ice feels distant, like something from a story someone else once told you, and yet it clings to your thoughts, glimmering just beneath the present moment, like a whisper waiting to be heard again. You duck into another shaded courtyard, this one quieter than the rest, and find a few elders gathered under a lattice of reeds. They sit on low stools, sipping from clay cups, their conversation drifting lazily like smoke from the brazier at the center. You ease into the shadows beside a fig tree, content just to listen. One of them is describing a strange frost he once saw coating the roof of his uncle's house. Another remembers a morning so cold the Nile mist froze onto the branches. They chuckle softly, not disbelieving, just amused by the rarity. These aren't grand tales. They're memories softened by age, polished by retelling. You realize that even the elders speak of ice the way others speak of comets or eclipses, rare, beautiful, and never guaranteed. And then the tone shifts. One of the men leans forward, lowering his voice. He speaks of a courtyard near the edge of the city where priests once gathered to conduct nighttime rituals. Not for gods exactly, but for the seasons, for balance. They would light no fire, wear no gold. They would wait in silence, listening for the cold. When it came, they would mark it, not just on papyrus, but in memory. Some believe this was their form of climate, keeping a quiet record of the world's breath. And here lies the debate. Some historians argue these accounts are symbolic, that waiting for the cold was metaphor for patience, for humility before the gods. But others suggest it was practical, that these priests may have been some of the first meteorologists, that they knew, more intimately than we give them credit for, how the desert moved between extremes. And maybe, just maybe, they knew how to summon the cold. You shift slightly, your back pressed against cool stone. Around you, the courtyard hums softly. Bees drift lazily through blossoms. A lizard sunbathes on a windowsill. And yet, there's a hush here that feels like agreement. Like everyone in this place understands that something delicate once lived alongside the heat. You stand and wander to the edge of the courtyard. There, half covered by vines, is a worn mosaic depicting a vessel with waves rising from it. At first you think it's steam, but no. Look closer. The waves don't rise. They fall, like icicles turned upside down. Some believe images like these were metaphorical, representations of sacred energy or purification. But others wonder if they were literal, visual records of a process lost to time. You reach out and brush away the dust. Beneath your fingers, the stone is cool. Not cold, not anymore. But in this heat, even cool feels like a marvel. And here's the curious, lesser-known detail. during the 19th century. French explorers in Egypt stumbled upon a partially collapsed building near Luxor. Inside, they found remnants of strange tools, shallow ceramic dishes, charred reed bundles, and fragments of jars with mineral crusts inside. The locals called it the Frost House. Most archaeologists ignored it, but a few took notes. And though no one has proved what it truly was, the theory persists. It may have been a place where the ancient practice of desert ice making was preserved longer than anyone believed. You step away from the mosaic, your mind heavy with possibilities. Perhaps that's the hardest part of this story, the not knowing. The gaps, the places where fact and myth bleed together, like melting ice soaking into sand. Still, you walk. The sun beats down harder now. You squint against it, stepping carefully between scattered market stalls and children playing chase with sticks. And then a strange moment. You pass a vendor with a small clay sign propped beside a jug. It reads simply, "Cold water." He offers it to you with a wink, and you lift the cup to your lips. It's cool, not icy, but cool enough to surprise you. You glance at the jug. It's wrapped in wet linen, perched in the shade, placed where the breeze is strongest. A modern echo of an ancient method, still practiced, still clever, still alive. You hand back the cup and thank him. He nods, as if to say, "Of course," because here in Egypt, the memory of cold is never entirely gone. It sleeps in jars. It lingers in basins. It hides in stories passed between elders under fig trees. And sometimes, if the wind is right and the stars are clear, it wakes. You step back into the sun and close your eyes, imagining the weight of an ice shard melting slowly in your palm. Not everything has to last forever to be real. You walk without aim now, letting the winding streets guide you, like a stream curling around stones. The sun is near its peak, casting white-hot shadows that hug close to walls and doorways. The heat is absolute. It radiates from every surface, turns the air syrupy, slows your breath. You squint, your vision shimmering like the edges of a dream. And yet, even here, at the height of Egypt's daily fire, you find yourself searching for the echo of cold. It's not long before a side alley draws your attention. Narrow arched, lined with thick brick that holds the night's chill just a little longer. You step inside. It's cooler here, marginally, but enough to notice. And tucked against one wall is something remarkable. A small door carved into the earth, partially hidden by brush and cloth. A young boy guards it, leaning lazily in the shade. He looks at you, then knocks twice. Someone opens from within. You're invited in without a word. It's a vault, not grand, not ceremonial, just a low, cool chamber dug into the hillside, lined with packed earth and smoothed stone. And yet, it feels like a treasure room, a sanctuary built not for Godel or scrolls, but for the fleeting breath of night. At the center sits a low table made of limestone ringed with clay bricks. On it, baskets filled with straw and linen bundles. You approach carefully. A servant unwraps one bundle to reveal a familiar shimmer. Ice still intact. Thinner, now beginning to bead with sweat, but unmistakable. This is preservation, not creation, not celebration, just the quiet art of keeping something impossible alive a little longer. The vault is filled with subtle genius. Vents carved at angles to guide airflow, layered mats to trap the rising warmth. Every inch is designed not to trap cold. That's impossible, but to delay the heat. A small victory in a land where the sun always wins eventually. And that's the point, isn't it? Not to defeat the heat, but to hold back the inevitable just long enough for something extraordinary to happen. You kneel near one of the baskets and brush your fingers across the ice. It's soft at the edges now, slick and thin, but still cool, still real. You feel a pang of emotion, gratitude almost, for the patience it took to make it, for the hands that gathered it before the sun rose, for the ingenuity that carved out this chamber in the side of a hill, somewhere above the market churns. Sandals slap spices, scatter, voices rise and fall. But here, in this pocket of cool earth time, has slowed. The servant offers you a sip from a small jug. You raise it to your lips and taste cold water. Metallic sweet, with the faint sting of mint leaves. It slides down your throat like a sigh. You don't speak. There's nothing to say. Here's the strange truth. Ancient Egypt had no single word for ice in the way we understand it today. Most references are contextual poetic. Biting water, still breath, hushed night. It's as if the language knew how fragile it was, how temporary, how sacred. Some scholars believe these vaults were connected to temples, not just in location, but in ritual. Cold as a form of purity, a reset. Before prayer, before burial, before birth. And yet, others remain unconvinced. They argue there's not enough documentation, that the materials wouldn't allow for true preservation. Where are the records, they ask. But maybe they're asking the wrong question. Maybe the record is the vault, the jar, the straw-lined basket, the techniques passed quietly through generations. Methods that didn't need writing because they were woven into the daily rhythm of a few. You rise now and step to the back wall where another servant tends a niche carved deep into the clay. Inside is a stack of narrow stone trays, each holding a single linen-wrapped object. He opens one, a bundle of figs cool to the touch. In another, a clay vial of honey wine beading with moisture. Chilled offerings, not for kings, not for rituals, for someone ill. You glance again at the water jug, at the straw, at the shelves, carefully arranged like an apothecary's dream. This isn't just refrigeration. It's mercy. Kindness cooled by effort. And here's your quirky detail in one fragment of a late-period diary. A young priest wrote about the healer's frost, a term used to describe when a fevered patient was brought a cloth rinsed in water from the cold vault. He sighed and smiled. It reads as if the sun had stepped away for a moment and let the night return. You stand in silence, touched by that image. Ice not as luxury, but as relief, as breath. Outside, the sun still reigns. But here in this carved hollow of shadow and straw, cold lives, just a little longer. The servant bundles the melting ice again, tying it gently, as if it were a wound. You step out of the vault into the glare. The heat clutches at you immediately, greedy and unforgiving. But inside your chest, the cold remains. The heat swallows you whole the moment you leave the vault. The brightness is blinding, so complete it feels almost solid. Your eyes adjust slowly, narrowing against the glare, your skin prickling as the sunlight sinks into your robe. There's no breeze. The world has entered that part of the day when the sun forgets restraint, when even shadows retreat, and the streets take on a shimmer that makes everything feel slightly unreal. And yet, despite the weight of the sun, you carry something cool inside you. A memory, a presence, a secret. It's not just about the ice anymore. It's about what it means to try to hold on to something impossible. You walk past rows of open homes, now their doorways shaded by thick curtains of woven reed. Within each, families gather in the darkest corners, fanning themselves, sharing bowls of water and fruit. Children splash water from clay basins onto their arms, their laughter rising like birds from still trees. You catch glimpses of clay jars wrapped in damp cloth, tucked in corners, sweating quietly into the air. These are small acts of resistance. You pause near one doorway and watch as a woman carefully lifts a pot and tilts it toward her daughter. The child opens her mouth, and a thin stream of cool water flows over her tongue. She closes her eyes in bliss, the way one might with a prayer. This is survival made graceful. And here's something fascinating. Some scholars believe the ancient Egyptians didn't separate science and spirituality the way we do. For them, understanding the night wind or the cooling of a jar wasn't just technical knowledge. It was communion, a partnership between people and creation. Nature wasn't something to be conquered, but something to be danced with, interpreted, responded to. You can feel that now. Every cooled jar, every shaded corridor, every servant who woke before dawn to gather frost. They weren't just performing tasks. They were honoring something. And still, not everyone agrees. Coincidence, some scholars say. They didn't intend to make ice. They stumbled upon it. But when you've seen the placement of jars, the layering of straw, the subtle architecture of airflow and shade, it's hard to believe in accident. Intent is everywhere, even in silence. A merchant waves to you now from a narrow stall. You wander over, drawn by the soft glow of polished alabaster vessels lined along his display. One, in particular, catches your eye. A wide bowl with a deep curve, its interior etched with tiny swirling lines. He lifts it reverently and speaks low. For cooling nectar, you raise your eyebrows. How? He shrugs with a smile and taps the base. It's ridged rough, designed to sweat through slow evaporation. He dips it in water and sets it aside, then fans it gently. Leave it in the dark, he says. It cools. A little. Enough. Enough. That word again. You nod, purchase the vessel, and carry it with you like a talisman. Coolness, even imagined, can be powerful in heat like this. Farther along the road, you see a group of children playing a curious game. They dig small bowls into the sand and fill them with water. Then they fan the bowls with palm fronds, mimicking the gestures of elders. They laugh when the water doesn't freeze, but they keep trying, over and over, imitating the sacred, practicing for a miracle. You wonder who taught them, and then another image, carved into a stone wall, nearly faded by sun and time, is a depiction of a servant lifting a bowl to a figure seated on a throne. The bowl holds what looks like light itself, a sparkle etched in stone, rising in spirals. Some say it's incense. Others say wine. But one guide once whispered to a group of travelers, "That's ice. Look at the breath coming off it." It's likely not true, but it feels true. You continue walking and arrive at a familiar square. The fig tree from this morning has drooped under the weight of the sun, its leaves hanging limp. Beneath it, the same group of women from earlier sit in a quieter mood, fanning themselves slowly. One of them sees you and gestures to a small jar beside her, still wrapped in linen. She lifts the cloth. Inside is a thin crust of ice. Barely anything, now more memory than substance. She offers it to you. You dip your fingers in. The cold stings gentle and ghostly. It melts almost immediately, sliding down your skin in a single perfect drop. She smiles. No words are needed. You thank her with a nod and move on, passing homes where pots are shaded just so, where palm leaf mats are positioned at angles that whisper secrets about the wind. You realize this knowledge. The ice, the cooling, the waiting isn't dead. It's quiet, dormant, preserved in gestures, in shadows, in how people choose to move through heat instead of against it. And that's the heart of it, isn't it? The ancient Egyptians didn't force the desert to freeze. They invited it. They prepared for it. They made space for cold to visit. Not to conquer the heat, but to live beside it for a while. You press your hand to the wall of a home as you pass. It's warm, but not unbearable. Someone shaded it well. You close your eyes and see it again. The jars, the shallow basins, the vault in the hillside, the servant boys with frost-bitten fingers, and the unshakable truth that they all knew something we've forgotten. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is wait for the night and know how to catch its breath. The afternoon deepens and the world begins to slow, not in exhaustion, though the heat certainly invites it, but in rhythm. The energy that buzzed earlier in the day begins to soften. Animals retreat into shadow. Conversations become murmurs. Even the sun, still blazing, seems less urgent now. You sense it, this gentle pivot toward evening, and feel the shift in your own body, too. You find yourself drawn toward the edge of the village, where the desert reclaims space beyond the last houses. The wind here is different. Drier, yes, but also older. It smells of stone, silence, and something you can't quite name, like time itself exhaled into the sand. As you walk, you spot another small structure partially buried in the dunes. It doesn't look like much. Cracked walls, no door, but the air changes as you approach. Cooler, faintly musty, like linen stored for too long. Inside, it's dim. The walls curve inward, forming a shallow dome lined with plaster and fragments of tile. You run your hand across one, and realize what you're standing in a cold vault, long abandoned. You kneel to brush sand away from the center of the floor. Beneath it lies a stone basin half filled with compacted straw and what looks like a broken clay jar, a remnant of the old ways. There's no ice here. There hasn't been for decades, maybe centuries, but the shape of the effort remains. And isn't that the story? Not the ice itself, but the imprint it left behind. This vault was once part of a network, maybe not an official one, not labeled on maps, but real, lived. A constellation of shaded corners, shallow basins, carefully watched jars, and whispered knowledge passed down through gestures, not words. You sit quietly in the dust, letting your eyes adjust. The air is still. Somewhere nearby, a lark calls. Once, then goes quiet again. It's in this silence that you begin to feel the weight of all the forgotten servants, artisans, women, and children who tended the breath of cold in the belly of fire. Not because they were ordered to, not for glory, but because they believed in the value of moments, of relief, of cool hands on hot skin, of cold water offered to a stranger. And here's a gentle, scholarly debate that has quietly lived on the margins of academic circles. Was this practice unique to Egypt? Or did other desert cultures, those in Persia, Morocco, even northern India, develop similar techniques independently? There's evidence of converging patterns. Evaporative jars, underground storage pits, rituals involving chilled items, but no conclusive link. Some argue Egypt pioneered the art. Others suggest they were one note in a larger, older symphony. Humans everywhere, learning to coax comfort from the edge of what was possible. And maybe that's the most humbling idea, that this story doesn't belong to a single people, but to anyone who ever sat through a sweltering night, whispering to the stars and hoping the air would shift. You brush your hand along the basin one more time, feeling the grooves left by ancient fingers. Someone once knelt here, like you, someone else, many someones, perhaps all hoping for the same thing, that the desert would be kind enough, just once more, to let the water forget its shape. Outside, the sun begins to lower, casting longer shadows. You emerge from the vault, slowly blinking at the brilliance. The heat is still strong, but it's weakening. The wind picks up slightly. You feel it tug at the edge of your sleeve, gentle but insistent, as if nudging you back toward the village. You obey, and as you walk, you catch sight of a young girl crouching near a clay jar set beneath an awning. She dips a cloth inside and presses it to her brother's forehead. He sighs in relief, leaning into the cool. Another echo. This isn't history kept in books. This is history kept in hands. You pass them with a smile, and the girl smiles back, proud of her small kindness. You keep walking. The sun continues its descent. The light turns amber, then peach. You wonder if tonight will be cold enough for ice. And you wonder who will be watching. The sky is shifting now. Soft orange, fading into lavender, the edges of the world dissolving into shadow. The heat is no longer harsh. It's mellow, lingering only in the stone beneath your feet and the bricks of the buildings around you. You feel it ebbing like a tide pulling away from the shore. You wander back toward the heart of the village, where the mood has changed again. There's something hushed in the way people speak, in the way they move. Not quite fatigue, something quieter. Anticipation, maybe. You pass a family gathered in a courtyard, placing pots in rows along the edge of a wall. The same kind of jars you saw the night before. Wide-mouthed, porous, perfectly positioned to catch the desert's breath when it cools. You pause, and an elder motions to you, inviting you closer. She is short, sun-browned, with hair wrapped in a simple cloth. Her hands are strong, gentle. She shows you the cloths she's soaking, the jars she's shaded, the straw she's set aside. No words, just gestures. It's a ritual, one passed down through hands and habit. And just like that, the cycle begins again. You realize this is the beginning of the night's dance. The preparation, the quiet choreography of people who know their place within nature's rhythm. You watch as others join children, bringing reeds, young men smoothing sand, a girl lighting a lamp and placing it far enough away so it won't warm the air around the jars. No one speaks loudly. No one directs. They just know. And here's a beautiful fact rarely discussed in textbooks in some rural Egyptian communities. This practice never fully disappeared. Even into the 20th century, there were reports of people using similar methods to chill their water. Clay pots placed in precise alignment, water cooled by wind and patience. Not for spectacle, for life. You sit beside the elder and let your fingers rest on one of the jars. It's full, heavy. She taps the side and listens. Not for music, but for something else, the way water responds to air. You don't hear anything, but she nods, satisfied. Above, the first stars appear. She points upward, then to the jar. You understand? The sky is part of the formula. No clouds, no wind, no heat radiating from a lingering moon. A clear, dry night is the rarest kind of invitation. You lean back, watching as the deep blue of dusk thickens into something richer. The village quiets even more. Meals have ended. Lamps are lit but low. The streets are nearly empty. Everyone seems to know that the desert does its most important work in silence. And here's your quirky detail for tonight in one obscure 5th century poem written on the wall of a well. In southern Egypt, a traveler scribbled, "I drank the night's kiss from a cold cup and forgot for a moment where I was." Scholars have long debated what he meant. Some think it was symbolic, poetic exaggeration. Others believe he had in fact been offered water, cooled by this very method, and the shock of it in the desert heat felt like a dream. You understand that now. You've felt it, that moment of cold against the skin in a place where everything is supposed to burn. The elder stands, dusts off her hands, and begins covering the jars with fine mesh. Just enough to keep the insects out, not enough to stop the breeze. She gestures for you to help. You do. Carefully, one by one. Your hands mirror hers. Steady. Light. A boy lights a small torch near the edge of the courtyard, the flame flickering gently. He places it high on a wall far from the jars, but close enough to guide movement in the dark. It feels ceremonial, even if it isn't. You sit again. A gentle breeze stirs your robe. The night is coming, and this time you know what to look for. You close your eyes and listen, not for sound, but for stillness, for that subtle shift when the heat lifts and the cold begins to seep in like a slow exhale from the earth. And in that space between dusk and dark, you remember everything. The vault, the servant boys, the priest's goblet, the healer's frost, the straw, the wool, the basin carved by hand, the girl cooling her brother's forehead, the generations that learned slowly and patiently to coax the impossible into being. You open your eyes. The stars are sharper now. The jars are silent, waiting. Night has settled fully now, not with fanfare, but like a tide inching over sand. Soft, sure, inevitable. You sit cross-legged in the courtyard, the sky spread wide above you, like dark silk pricked with light. The jars rest in their places, silent and solemn, their surfaces glinting faintly in the torchlight. The heat of the day is gone, truly gone. You can feel it in your chest, in your breath. The air no longer resists you. It welcomes you. The desert for these brief hours becomes tender. A soft breeze glides through the courtyard, lifting your robe, kissing the clay, wrapping itself around the jars like a story retold. You know what's happening. The same slow ritual that began the night before. The same waiting. The same hope. But tonight feels different. Now you understand. Across the courtyard, a family is gathered near a low table, sipping tea in silence. The children are already asleep, curled in blankets, their cheeks flushed from the long day. One of the adults stands and walks over to a jar, tipping his head toward it, listening. Not with ears, but with presence. You've learned to do the same. You walk over, press your palm to the jar's side. It's already beginning to cool. Not cold, not yet, but it started. You feel it, like the desert exhaling. And here's the curious thing. Many modern scientists who study climate history now acknowledge that ancient peoples had access to environmental rhythms we've since drowned out with machines' lights' constant movement. We've forgotten how to listen to temperature shifts, how to read wind and moisture as though they were language. But these people knew how to listen. And not just with their senses, but with their structures, their habits, their stillness. You sit again on the mat, folding your hands in your lap. The courtyard is quiet, save for the occasional rustle of palm fronds or the bark of a distant dog. The air smells like dud and cool water and baked clay, the scent of waiting. There's another scholarly debate that surfaces here, subtle and often overlooked. Did the Egyptians consider this kind of night work sacred? Not in the temple sense, but in the everyday sense. Was gathering cold part of their spiritual rhythm, their philosophy of balance between elements? Some believe so. They point to certain seasonal rituals, ones not tied to stars or floods, but to moments of equilibrium, a day of equal light and dark, a night when the earth pauses, a time for stillness. This, they argue, is when the people waited for ice, not just for need, not just for privilege, but for awe. You look around at the courtyard. The people here aren't speaking. They're simply with the night, attentive, gentle. No one hurries. No one forces. And now, a quirky observation. An inscription found in a minor tomb near Thebes reads, "He who taught the jars to sleep beneath the stars. His name is remembered in the breath of cool water." It's not clear whether this man was a priest, a farmer, or a clever servant. But someone remembered him. Someone carved his contribution into stone. You let that linger in your thoughts as the minutes pass. The stars grow sharper. The cold deepens. You shiver slightly and pull your robe tighter. This is not a grand story. It's not about conquest or kings. It's about small moments, quiet ingenuity, human hands doing quiet work beneath ancient skies. And in that way, it becomes more miraculous. The family begins to pack up their things. The adults lift the sleeping children, bundle them in blankets, and slip through the courtyard gate. One of them glances back at the jars before disappearing down the alley. There's no need to check them. They'll do what they're meant to do, if the night allows. You remain. It's almost midnight now. You lie back on the mat, the stone beneath you, cooled by hours of air. Above, constellations move imperceptibly. You watch one star blink out behind a rooftop, and then another emerge on the opposite horizon. Time slides. You rise and walk once more to the nearest jar, and there it is a sheen. You touch it, and your fingertips tingle. You press gently, and the surface resists. Just barely. The first skin of ice. It's begun. You smile. Not because it's a surprise, but because it still feels like one. No matter how much you understand, no matter how often it happens, the fact that the desert can produce ice will always seem a little impossible. You return to your mat, lie down again, and pull the blanket around you. The breeze slips past your cheek. A small moth flutters across your field of vision. Somewhere in the distance, a flute begins to play. Soft, slow, perhaps just for the night itself. You close your eyes and let the cold arrive. The air is sharp now, not biting, not cruel, just keen. A blade honed by hours of stillness, whispering across the courtyard like a secret only the night understands. You sit upright, drawing your robe closer, and notice the change immediately. Every jar, every basin, every wall holds a hush inside it. The kind of hush that suggests something is happening, something rare. You rise barefoot on the cool earth and step to the nearest jar. Your hand trembles slightly as it reaches out. You expect coolness, but you feel cold, a real cold. You peer inside. The water has transformed. A crust of ice, thin but firm, stretches across the surface like a breath held too long. You press your fingers to it and feel resistance. Then a soft crack. It gives way, and a ripple echoes across the liquid beneath. You smile into the dark. This is the moment. Around the courtyard, others begin to appear. No one speaks. They don't need to. Some kneel near their jars. Some gather reeds to begin collecting what has formed. You spot the elder woman again. She catches your eye and nods, not in surprise, but in affirmation. The night has given its gift. This is the harvest. The young move quickly as they must. Time is limited. The sun is still far off, but the desert forgets quickly. Already, the air holds a promise of return, a warmth waiting to reclaim the space. They carry the ice gently, never bare-handed, always with cloth or straw. The frost is gathered into lined baskets destined for cellars, temples, or the hands of healers. Some is stored, some is traded, some is simply offered to the sick, the elderly, the newborn, a blessing cold and fleeting. You move through the courtyard watching. No one rushes. It's all done with care, with reverence. And here comes your final, gentle, scholarly debate. Was this practice ever written into law? Were there royal decrees reserving ice for the elite? Some argue yes, pointing to restricted temple zones and guarded vaults. Others insist it was too unstable to be controlled, too ephemeral to be taxed or hoarded. A gift of nature, not bureaucracy. But here tonight, you see the truth for yourself. It belonged to those who knew how to wait, who knew how to prepare, who knew how to listen. The boy from earlier carries a shard to his sister, pressing it to her cheek. She gasps, then giggles. The sound is soft, joyful. Behind her, a man carefully packs a cloth-wrapped bundle into a clay chamber beneath the courtyard. He seals it, not with a lock, but with straw and shade. You sit again on your mat, wrap your arms around your knees, and breathe in the air. It smells like wet clay and starlight. This is the part no one writes down. The emotion of the cold, not just the fact of it, not the data or the dates or the diagrams, but the sensation, the wonder, the collective hush of a community witnessing something beautiful, fragile, real. A cat tiptoes past you, her paws silent on the stone. She stops near a jar and peers in, curious, cautious. She sniffs, then flicks her tail and continues on. The sky above has shifted to silver. Stars fade at the edges. The black gives way to blue. The horizon just barely begins to glow. The sun is coming, and the cold knows it. Already you see beads of water forming along the jars. The thin skin of ice shivers. The servants move faster now, not panicked, but efficient. The harvest must end before the first light touches the rims. One by one, the jars are emptied, the basins wiped, the cloths folded and set aside. You help where you can, lifting, carrying, wrapping. The ice stings your hands even through cloth, but you welcome it. This is your farewell. You carry a final bundle to the vault where it will rest for a few more hours before vanishing into memory. And now, slowly, beautifully, the light crests the edge of the rooftops. The sun touches the courtyard. The cold begins to retreat. You stand still watching, not with sadness, but with awe, because you were here, because you saw it, because in a place ruled by fire, you held winter in your hand. And as the last frost melts into the stone, you smile. The courtyard is empty now. The jars have been moved. The mats rolled. The last traces of cold have slipped quietly into the warming earth, leaving behind only damp stone and the ghost of what was. You sit alone beneath the fig tree, its leaves gently rustling in the morning breeze. The sun has claimed the village again, painting gold across every rooftop, every path, every wall. Children are laughing somewhere distant and bright, the sound of sweeping of water, being poured of footsteps, beginning the long sunlit day. And yet you remain in the stillness a little longer. Your hands remember the feeling of frost, your lips the kiss of chilled water, your breath the hush that came just before the ice arrived. It lingers inside you, not cold now, but calm. Everything about the night feels distant already, as if it slipped into myth the moment the light returned. But you carry it, quietly, gently, like a secret pressed between the pages of a book. The miracle of ice in the desert wasn't loud. It didn't blaze or roar. It whispered. It waited. And you too learned to wait with it, to listen, to believe. And maybe as the day unfolds and the heat rises and the dust dances in the streets, you'll pass someone else who remembers. A glance, a nod, a knowing. Because some things, like stillness, like awe, like the softest kind of wonder, don't disappear with the sun. They just settle deeper into memory, into the body, into dreams. So close your eyes now. Let the warmth wrap around you, but keep that cool breath tucked somewhere safe, somewhere quiet. You've seen it. You've felt it. And now it's time to rest.